Habari asubuhi, habari manchana, habari gani, as we would say in Kwanzaa, which means what is the news? In using another tongue, for those of us that are African descended, 52 countries. If you all can repeat after me, habari gani. Habari gani. Yes. So in Kwanzaa, we say that to bring back a remembrance. Habari manchana is a way of we greet each other if it was afternoon. Habari asubuhi is how we would say it in the morning. We here in Richmond teaching this in the parks, and we're very excited to have you all come to this community meeting / listening session. I would start off, if I can, in giving homage to the ancestors. If those watch the AB 3121 sessions online, Teafa, who is one of my mentors, she did this libation on. It was very profound because we have to remember and temper who we are in this system that constantly tells us to forget. Note, just like you said, call and response for habari gani. I'm going to ask for the libation. This is just to bring into the. I'm going to first call, which is historically a precedent here in Richmond, boy that was killed by the police, that prompted the Black Panthers, not in Oakland, but here in Richmond. So on that, we say Ashe. I would also like to say for those with the Richmond Alliance, some of the Black Panthers that stood and why we have a diverse city council. We want to say to those Black Panthers, Ashe. And I would love if anyone wanted to bring anyone in the room, ancestors that you would like to pay homage to on this land or not. Lily Mae Reddy, my great-great-grandmother. Ashe. 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 All together. Ashe.
Virginia High.
Ashe.
Francis Bratton.
All together. Sterling Alston, my great-grandfather who built 10 houses. Ashe. All together. Ashe. And all those we haven't named, all those that have been suffering in all our family members that are extended as well as blood, we together as I pour all of it. Ashe. Ashe. Kosi sikelele Africa, malupake niso ayo, is where you mitandos yetu. Kosi sikelele. This is the song that binds us all together. What country in Africa your lineage came from? 52 countries. But this is a song that unites. Africa wasn't always united. And I believe in California, because AB 3121, just like we have 57 counties, we're not all united. But I believe this can be the reckoning for us, to bring us together like this song. So I want to at least let everyone know logistical-wise, there's food here on the side. In the cooler, there's some water. If you go past the green balloon in the back, through the door, and to the right, there's the restrooms. Feel free to grab information. Please sign in on the sign-in sheet. I am very grateful to Lita Torre. I'm here in Richmond, not only with the Richmond, I'm also part of the Richmond Progressive Alliance as a steering committee member. Come on in. We are very glad and excited to have everyone and this great CJEC that invited us to this reckoning of bringing the statewide AB 31 task force into our communities, into our cities, so we can hear from you, so we can hear more. So thank you for coming. And without, I bring our entertainment because it's so appropriate, who we are as African Americans, to remember who we are. And so in doing so, I welcome former principal Jonette Newton of Martin Luther King School, who's going to sing to perform a rendition for us tonight. And Ms. Jonette, if you're ready. Hello? Feel free, we would love to have you come. Yes. John. I was like, oh my gosh, let me check and see if I said it right. Tonight, I'm sorry, I'm just.
You got everybody.
I was about to say, how do you spell that?
My voice, remember, school teacher, right? This reparation thing is tonight, and I'm going to, when I get my reparations, first place I'm going, she's I said, just don't say Disneyland. Just don't say what? Oh, don't say Disneyland. That's a good one. No, excuse me. Okay. I'm gonna tell you. Okay. First place I'm going when I get my reparation. Listen up. I'm sorry. I'll get back one. Okay. I'm supposed to sing national anthem, okay? Now you know national anthem. You know they play it at the football games and everything else. Okay. You know you're supposed to stand in the national anthem, right? Now this was written way before the start of the national anthem. Black History Month, December 31st. And you know, when Martin Luther King was around, we did a whole bunch of this. Those reparations. Right. Thank you. Thank you. I can't say that sit down. Okay. Go ahead.
Mic check. 1 2 1 2. How's my sound? I'm good. I'm good. Just making sure. Do you need a hand? Sure. Okay. Can we hear one more time, please, for Jeanette? Please, one more time. So my co-host is in the back there. What I'm gonna do, and by the way, thank everybody for coming. Thank y'all. Also, thank everybody that's watching right now on the live stream. And tell y'all, and I'm gonna go a little bit off script here to start, and then tell you who I am. I think most of y'all know who I see a bunch of familiar faces already here, but it's probably our 6th, maybe 7th time we've been in the community doing something like this. This time we're working in partnership with some amazing folks here in Richmond Progressive Alliance, the Sower, International Community Co-op, a bunch of other amazing groups. And this is just an example of what you're going to continue to see our group, CJEC, but also from amazing groups as we continue to come into our community and talk about California. And again, we are working in partnership with a bunch of great groups to put this event on. They welcomed us into the Richmond community and into the Richmond family. It's my Richmond, by the way, so definitely a treat for me. First of all, my name is Chris. Already, I see my family in here already. I'm Chris, one of the lead organizers, just one of the lead organizers with CJEC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable. CJEC, as many of you know, is a statewide grassroots coalition, California-based community organizations that work for reparations, justice all across the state. Our team, for those of you who don't know, our team was one of the biggest parts and most important reasons why the California reparations law that created the California Reparations Task Force. Our team first revised and then passed the law that created the California Task Force, AB 3121, as we call it. And now we are our work to make sure that the California Reparations Task Force and process transparent, is responsive to community voices like yours, and then it's also going to make sure that we have the strongest reparations proposals and the strongest reparations legislation possible. So that's what we're doing now. And we're working to make sure that, well, first let me also say that I want to thank the live stream team here, ETM Media Group. I cannot forget ETM Media Group for all their amazing work live streaming the meeting today, also live streaming all of the California Reparations public meetings. So big shout out to ETM Media Group, and also again, shout out to those who are joining us live here on the live stream. If you're in the live stream, YouTube, or you're watching on Facebook, make sure you like, share, subscribe to ETM Media. So leave a comment, leave a question, your thoughts, into the process as we get community feedback and community input and community for California reparations. Hopefully my sound is good. It's always talking to a mic, so it's a little bit weird for me to talk into the mic, so y'all gonna have to bear with me. What I'm gonna do for y'all here, very briefly, and then we're gonna get to you and get to listening to y'all questions, and then get to y'all testimonials and y'all stories about why we need reparations here in California. But what I want to do is I want to give you a view of the California Reparations Task Force. I want to talk about why there is a task force. I want to talk about who's on the task force. I want to talk about what when we talk about reparations. We got a couple slides, maybe 2-3 slides for y'all. Everybody in here should have this on their seat, in their hand, somewhere. And then we're gonna answer any questions that you have, and then we're gonna hear from you. Very, very briefly, as many of you know, but California created a reparations task force in 2020. The law that created the task force was written by now Secretary of State Dr. Weber, then California, San Diego Assembly member Weber, and the law was signed into the law that created the task force was signed by now Governor Gavin Newsom. The California Reparations Task Force, 9 members. We're actually very fortunate to have one of those members here today. Mr. Marky Don is right here in the front row. Raise your hand. Thank you, Don. Thank you. Please welcome Don and thank Don for pulling up in person. I think this is the second time, probably right on. The second time we've seen Don in person. And yeah, so Don was Oakland meetings, I believe it was either back in September or October, and then has been very up to join us here for our first meeting in Richmond. And Don is one of 9 members. The California Reparations Task Force members of it have 2 years to complete their work, but there is some news to share that, and I saw this maybe in the last 24 hours, that there is now a new piece of legislation that's way through the California legislature to extend the of the task force by 1 year. I believe it's AB 2296. That's the number on the bill. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the breaking news. I didn't hear about that for up until the last 48 hours. So the task force right now has 2 years to complete its work up until June 1st of 2023. May or may not be extended by at least 1 year. So we'll definitely see. The task force by law will have at least 10 public meetings, and also now at least community listening sessions. And what's interesting to say about the public meetings is, if I'm not mistaken, and Don, I may ask you to correct me, the 7 virtual meetings that they've had so far, only one of those meetings count toward the 10 public meetings. The clock or count for the public meetings will start when the task force starts to meet at their first meeting in April. That's my understanding. Don, you definitely feel if I'm wrong about that, but we may have more meetings than we think we have, because the first 6 or 7 have been completely virtual so far. So at least first one, it's only been one official counted public meeting as it counts toward that 10. So we may have, after or starting when the task force meets in April, have an additional 7, 8 meetings in person. So long way to say the 6 or 7 meetings, or the 6 meetings that we've seen so far, 6 of the 7 that have been virtual, they will not be counted toward the official 10. Have another 7, 8 meetings after the task force starts to meet in April. 10 public meetings, 12 community listening sessions. The California Reparations Task Force has 3 big jobs, 3 general jobs. The first job is to study and collect the evidence for reparations with a focus on the state of California. So that's the first job. That's their first job. The second job is to find ways to educate the California public about what it finds out. And it's the job that most of us are most excited about, and I say this pretty much whenever we meet. The third job is to actually create reparations, legislation. What you need to know is those proposals and that legislation will be the foundation of what we create as reparations here in California. So those legislation have to become law. They have to be made into law themselves. Let me share a little bit of information with you about the California Reparations Task Force themselves. We have an amazing chair of the California Reparations Task Force. For some reason, I always remix that word reparations for some reason. The chair of the California Reparations Task Force is Camilla. Camilla is a reparatory justice scholar and an attorney with a specialization in entertainment and intellectual property transactions. As a law student, committed to human rights reports related to domestic and international human rights, including but not limited to racial inequality in Brazil, right to sanitation in Loudoun County, Alabama, the human right to remedy for indigenous Black women affected by racialized in Papua New Guinea. The vice chair of the task force is Brown. Dr. Amos Brown is probably known to most of y'all. He is a native here of the Bay Area, out of San Francisco. Renowned civil rights leader, studied under Dr. Martin Luther King himself, was a Dr. Martin Luther King at one point at a lunch counter back in 1960, and joined the Freedom Riders who protested segregation in the South. So Brown is the vice chair. We also have on the task force Senator Stephen Bradford. Mr. Bradford is a former city council member and now state senator representing the LA area, chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. We also have on the task force Reginald Jones, Assembly member Reginald Jones Sawyer, representing the LA area. Also, he's the chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. Big shout out to Montgomery Stepp, who is also a member of the California Reparations Task Force. Thanks for the slides, appreciate that. Monica Montgomery Stepp is a San Diego City Council member in San Diego, winner of the 2018 San Diego Voice of the Year Award and the 2021 Ashley Walker Social Justice Award. Also on the task force, we have Dr. Javon Scott Lewis, also a native and resident of the area here. He's an economic anthropologist and associate professor in the Department of Geography at the University of California, UC Berkeley. Don Tamaki, who is here in the audience with us. Don is known for work serving on the pro bono legal team that reopened the landmark Supreme Court Korematsu versus the United States Supreme Court, which overturned Korematsu's conviction for refusing incarceration during the mass incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. And that provided a very important legal foundation for the decades-long Japanese American redress movement. Sometimes I say the Don of the task force, who's actually been a part of an actual reparations. And I think part of what we are learning is that while there are similarities between the two stories, there's a lot that we can learn. So and again, thank you, Don, for showing up here in person for the second. Also on the task force, we have Dr. Cheryl Grills, who is a clinical psychologist, current emphasis in community psychology on the faculty of Loyola Maryland University, LMU, for the past 34 years. She's a professor of psychology, the Psychology Applied Research Center, president, professor in their College of Arts, and Dr. Grills is also a past president of the Association of Black Psychologists, currently serves as commissioner and vice chair of the LA Council, Los Angeles County Civil Brand Commission for inspections. Last but not least, on the task force, we have Lisa Holt, Esquire, who is a nationally recognized award-winning trial attorney. Ms. Holder currently operates a civil rights focuses on a wide array of legal services, including police misconduct, discrimination, public school equity, and wage and hour litigation. And Ms. Holder's practice also severance packages and workplace accommodations, negotiations, criminal trials, and diversity, equity, and inclusion counseling. So those are the members of the Reparations Task Force. You got a slide up here that you can see their faces. You got a slide in your hand that you can see each of those members also. And as we continue this overview, I want to talk a little bit about what we mean, say the word reparations, as it relates to this effort, as it relates to the California Reparations effort. So generally speaking, when we talk about reparations, we are talking, and this is generally speaking, making amends in some way for a wrong done, paying money, and helping those who have been wronged. So bare minimum definition, reparations, money, those who have been wronged. But reparations, what though? What are we talking about reparations for? Reparations for what? We are absolutely talking about reparations for U.S. slavery, and for ongoing discrimination and exclusion today. By this country. In California reparations will be for those of us whose ancestors came here not by choice, were kidnapped and sold and forced to work for free for hundreds of years and then turned loose with nothing. Reparations are for the Black folks who built this country. Our team, by the way, CJEC, we actually have language in another piece of legislation right now that's moving across legislature right now. It's called AB 1604. In Section 4 of AB 1604, which that would help California figure out who is a descendant of slavery and who is not. That bill requires, for the first time ever, every single agency and every single department to break down lineage, the Black or African American category, so that easily and better identify who is a descendant of U.S. is not. So that's AB 1604, Section 4. If you're not familiar with that, please get familiar with 100%. So I want to wrap this part up, but I want to say a couple other reparations, specifically about the forms of reparations. Which forms are we talking about? What forms would and should reparations come in? I've generally accepted, generally recommended, generally agreed upon forms, at least, of reparations. Compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. The California Reparations Task Force match whatever types of reparations they create to those 5 recognized forms of reparations. Thank you so much for the slide there. But what do those words mean, though? What does compensation mean? What does restitution mean? What does rehabilitation mean? Satisfaction and guarantees of non-repetition mean? So, compensation, I think this is probably the most easily understood. Compensation means financial, monetary, and economic awards for, in our case, reparations for eligible. We're talking specifically about compensation financially, monetarily, economically. If you ask me, if it doesn't have compensation, it's not. That's I think clear. Compensation must be a part of reparation. Restitution means restoring eligible parties in position before the violations occurred to the best of your ability. So, to the best of your ability, you must also restore the person eligible to their position before the violations occurred. Rehabilitation, generally speaking, means providing care and services for persons beyond compensation. Satisfaction, and this is one of the more, I think, debatable, but I would say satisfaction is one of the more types of reparations, because satisfaction usually means symbolic gestures like public apologies and things like that. But I think actually help redefine what we mean by satisfaction when it comes to reparations. Generally speaking, guarantees of non-repetition mean tangible assurances to the eligible person that the same or similar will not be repeated. So we've got compensation, we've got rehabilitation, we've got satisfaction, guarantees of non-repetition. Those are the 5 generally accepted forms of reparations. I think, by the way, that here in California, we're actually gonna figure out on top of those forms and actually create some forms that maybe are not in those 5 forms of reparations. But again, by law, the California Task Force has to create reparations proposals that at least fit with those 5 forms of reparations. And again, one more time, that's restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. That is a general overview of the AB 31 California, AB 3021 California Reparations Task Force. That is a general overview of who is on the task force and what we mean when we say the word. Let me pause here. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts from the audience? And just a heads up, if you have a question, we have a mic set up for you right here. So if you have a question or even a comment about anything that you've heard so far, for you right here, ask your specific question. I feel like my mic went out right there. So the mic is still good. Y'all can still hear me, right? I'm sure. 1 2 1 2. Look like the mic went out. I'm happy to talk loud.
I think you're back.
Yeah, 1 2 1 2. Mic check. Also, Kim, by the way, could you check if there are questions coming comments too on the live stream? And this goes to the folks on the live stream too. If you have questions or about the California Reparations Task Force.
Bluetooth pair. Bluetooth.
Sounds like
Matter of fact, we do have a question.
okay.
Does student loan for free college count as compensation, help with home ownership?
So does free college, does student loan for forgiveness student loan forgiveness or free college count as compensation, help with home ownership. So my check sounds like we are coming back with a sound. Thank you. Big shout out to the ETM Media family, Moya. So does free college count? And this is the question. I'll repeat the question one more time. Does free college count as, or could free college count as compensation or student loan or help with home ownership? So we'll answer to that question, and this will be also part of what the California Reparations Task Force actually decides, right? But from my when we talk about compensation, we are talking about direct financial compensation to you as an individual. Do with that compensation, obviously, would be your choice. Home forgiveness, help with home ownership, those probably other forms of reparations. So they might be able to fit under either restitution. For example, if you're talking about student loan forgiveness, right, because that may restore you to a place of that you were prior to. The help with home might fall under rehabilitation because that's providing non-financial to help and care for specific people. But when we talk about compensation, we are talking about direct compensation to you as an individual, and then you decide what you want with that compensation. So the short answer would be no, but those would be parts of forms of reparations. So help with your student loans, restoring people's credit and resetting our credit. A place that is either, for me, it would be to a bin. So resetting our credit would be a really good form of reparations. But it wouldn't be compensation. It would probably be something like restoration or rehabilitation, more likely. So that would be something like rehab. Any other questions, Kim, in the comments? Just checking. Also, do you have any questions? Come up here, brother. Thank you very much for coming up to the mic. Appreciate it.
Hello?
Yes.
Is it on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, nice.
Right on.
I was a little late. Is the purpose of this meeting to gain community support or just to spread information?
Great question. So the purpose of it. So the question was, is the purpose of this to gain community support or spread information? The answer is a little bit of both. But it's also something else too. It's to actually hear from folks like you why you think must have reparations. What has happened in your life that makes you feel like you need reparation? And also here, and it's also a way for you to share type of testimonial and information to members of the California Reparations Task Force. So short answer is yes. And then also want to hear from you too. And actually part of the program, we're gonna have a specific part of this program after we do the Q&A that will give you to talk about what type of discrimination you face and why you for California's Reparations Task Force to hear, and then also you think we need reparations. Now, I want to be clear, the task force is already sat, it's already working to create proposals and having public meetings and learning about U.S. slavery, learning about California's role in U.S. slavery, sharing that information. That's already happening. And again, part of what we're doing here is making sure that you're a part of that process. We also have a member of the California Reparations Task Force. So, yeah.
My question.
Sure.
My name is Quincy, by the way. So I assume there will be more meetings.
Yes.
And are they only in the Bay Area or is this throughout California?
Good question. So, and actually, that was going to be one of my questions we should ask. So that's a real good. So, there will be more meetings like this. So yes. In the Bay Area, no. We have had, so our team at CJEC, this is probably our 7th community meeting. We did one in LA in December. We did two in Oakland back in October. We did one in Sacramento. I feel like it was in July of last year. We did one that was virtual. So this is our first time in Richmond. So 6th or 7th meeting that we've done. But add on to your question a little bit, because the California Reparations Task Force, as I mentioned in the opening here, or in the overview here, they're going to be doing 12 community listening sessions. 12 community listening sessions that are officially sponsored, anchored, I sometimes call it, by the California Reparations Task Force. So there are community groups that are right now working to create their plans and their listening session. We're going to do at least two. Those two right now are tentatively planned for the month of May and the month of. So obviously, you'll definitely check out our website, CJEC's official .org for any more information on that. And also CJ, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I think on TikTok too. So that's where you find out more information. And also the California Reparations Task Force has a website that you can go to. That information will be posted on those websites too. And then also a bunch of flyers. Well, there will be flyers for those bro. And then I know also the folks with the Richmond Progressive Alliance and the folks who helped us put this one on are doing a listening session in Maroon on April 9th, I believe, and there's a flyer right there for it too.
And I'll give more information that some of us are doing together, because we're working with CJEC, but we're starting groups in different places purposely. So I'll do that during the call to action. Yeah, it's a mobilization campaign.
Thank you, appreciate it. Questions? Two real good questions. Other questions, and Kim, help me out on the comments too. If there are any questions coming in on the comments, my sound sounds good. So there are a couple of questions though. That I think my sound is okay. Come on up. We got some more questions coming up. Right on. Big shout out, Tony.
And just pay homage to 80th year the executive order 9. That was signed in 1942, February 1942. Attorney question that was mentioned at the beginning. There's another legislation, a piece of legislation that's being pushed through the legislature. That would extend AB 3121, so that's going to give it another year, because I know they're about to have their 8th meeting at the end of this month, task force that is. And they're supposed to come out with a report in June, and then they're supposed to submit the report in January 2023, and then by next summer 2023, we'll have everything ironed out. Now you're telling me they're going to push it. We're looking at 2024.
Possibly,
right. Why? And understandably so, because it's a lot of stuff to process. Well, why would they add on to that? I'm just trying to figure that part out. And is it, just give us as much information as possible.
That's a great question. Thank you, Tony. By the way, big shout out to California Black Media, Sacramento Observer. Big love. Thank y'all for. So. Couple things, and my answer is going to be direct on one of those pieces, but it's not as direct on some of the other pieces, because some of the answers, I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't know, but I have what I think might be the answer, and now specifically because well, let me answer your question. So just on the point you made about the number of community meetings, the number of public meetings, 10 public meetings by law. Right? As I was saying earlier, what we understand now is that six of the 7 public meetings that we've seen so far, the meetings have been virtual. 6 of those 7 meetings will not count toward the. So we actually have, starting when the task force starts to meet in person in April, I believe in San Francisco, there will be at least another 8 meetings on top of what we've already seen. So that, I think, necessarily extend the task force work most absolutely into. And right now, the task force has to finish its work by June 1st of 2023. I want to get to your point about the extension or the possible extension. So I don't know why there is an effort to extend the work of the task force. I have to speculate. The likely reason, and to be honest with you, I would love to hear what you do. And also, we don't have to, I think, guess too much. The person who introduced the legislation is actually one of the members of the Reparations Task Force. I believe that was introduced by Assemblymember Reginald Jones Sawyer, who I talked about a little bit earlier. Was this slide here. So I want to hear from Sawyer why exactly there is an effort to will have a direct answer. But my thinking is, and the question back to some of y'all too at some point, but my thinking is that because we know, and let's go back to what we said about the process, the task force is going to create reparations proposals. Those proposals themselves then have to be made into law. So let's find this out, right? Let's say we get reparations proposals by, let's say, sometime in 2023. We have actual language for reparations. So now it's 2023. We have language after we've done work. We have language for reparations proposals. Great. We have another job now because that language, those proposals, and that legislation then have to work to get that made into law. So part of the extension may be, and I'm just speculating here, and again, we're going to hear from we expect to hear from the actual person who introduced this legislation to extend it. The idea may be that since we're going to be working on reparations 2023 into 2024, potentially into 2024 and into 2025, that it may make sense to have continue its work through that time. That is one of the things that I think is the answer. But again, I'm just speculating. There was no discussion of that at the last reparations meeting. I'm not sure that the legislation was even introduced by the last task force meeting, but it probably would have had to be because the last day to introduce any new legislation was, I think, the 18th of February. So legislation would have had to have been in at least the process 2 weeks. So that's a really good. And again, we're going to hear from the person who introduced that at the next task force, and I'm expecting to hear something about why there is an effort that, and maybe I can even deflect you down here because I just ask you, do you know? Did you know?
I did not get that memo.
Okay.
The extension, so I have no idea about it. The issue of reparations and the amount and how you do it is complex. It just as, the oppression for years, it's not going to be solved in a year. So I could see that there might be to extend it. The work right now, I got to tell you, is crushing. Okay, in June, the task force is going to submit a 600 pages. It connects the dots between the beginnings of the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow, through racial violence, through separate but equal through segregation, planning, including places, Richmond, Oakland, Hunter, public health, another thing, racial wealth gap. And then the second part that you mentioned is in June of 2023, is defining reparations, who is eligible, how do you calculate it, forms that it should it take, and so on. And then after that, it is a question in terms of how this is translated into law. It's a daunting effort, and I could see might be a reason to extend it, but I've not heard anything about that. Piece I think you're after is the 10 meetings is really a budgeted thing. Originally budgeted before COVID for to rent places for venues for the public hearings up and down California, travel, paying staff, paying for security, everything that goes with it. Because the meetings have been virtual, the budget has not been used. So therefore, I think that you're talking about extending it is accurate. I anticipate another set of varied meetings, public hearings, in addition to virtual engagement, community engagement listing set.
So that would take it to the end, right through 2022 then.
Yeah, the community, maybe you can answer this, Chris. The listening sessions will be concluded sometime in the fall, winter this year.
Well, I'm sorry. Council, on the task force, would that continue?
Into 2023.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's separate from the listening session.
Because they're completely separate, but related. And we're just starting with this question of eligibility. And those will go into this year and defining what reparations might look like. We're certainly going to go into 2023. And then integrate, the testimony of people, the final report, which will issue in 2023.
Right. And then I wanted to thank you for that, Don. I wanted to just touch on the point that you were making here too. The length of the community listening session process is going to go on. What we expect is that the community listening session process. So this is the 12 community listening session that the task force approved on top of the 10 votes. So what we expect is that process will go through from now until September of this year, and they will use what is collected in that process to help them obviously to decide and do their work. That will be submitted, that all the testimony, all the feedback that we get from folks like y'all, that will be submitted and officially submitted by September. So that's what we expect now. You're asking for a really good question because we really just learned. Yeah. Okay. Cool. What we learned. So we just learned about this potential extension. I literally just saw language for the legislation in the last and again, there was no discussion of it or even hint at it at the task force meeting, which was just last week. So I'm definitely interested in specifically Assemblymember Reginald Jones Sawyer, who introduced the legislation about and extent. Yes. So. Do you mind coming up here, Don? And people. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Since you were right on.
I have a question here from the chat.
Cool. And then Robert got a question too. Robert, do you mind coming up to the mic? Please. Thank you. So we got a question so let me question first because Robert was weighing, and then let's get the question from the chat too. What's up, brother?
All right, well, I have multiple questions. The point that Dr. Maki brought up, he said that the eligible requirements discussion will continue on until 2023.
No, that will be determined, that, I expect that to be determined at the meeting. And it's scheduled for a full day with a vote at the March meeting.
Okay. And then also, into the timeline, this new timeline is great that the task force is continued. I don't have a problem with that per se, but my worry is ends up becoming what we don't want it to be, and that's like just a legislation that is a long-standing study that people can use to say, hey, look, we're doing Negro, but nothing ever actually gets done. So I would like to know, proposal and tangible that come along with the original timeline the task force is to be extended.
I want to help answer that question. So, short answer to the question is yes. And what was interesting about the language to extend the task force timeline didn't have anything about extending or changing the report timeline. So I thought there was nothing in there that said let's extend the report timeline or let's so right in the law, the second and final report is still due in June of 2020. That is the report that we expect to have the actual language that we're going to use for legislation and potentially even, there may be some things outside of legislation, for example. There may be some ideas that folks like Don and the rest of the task force that are ideas for things that the governor could do on his own. Maybe, right? We don't know yet, but the deadline for that second report is still the same, and that's not being changed. At least we can see now. At least it's not a part of the attempt to extend the legislation. So short answer to your question is yes. There will still be legislation with tangible benefits in them that we should expect to see by June of 2023. And I don't think, and maybe Don, you may have some more information on this, but I don't think there's anything precluding task force from actually doing things before 2023 either. That may, I know there was some question about that with respect to there was an opinion on that by the Department of Justice, I think at the January meeting, about at least some task force could not do, but I don't think thing that is precluding the task force from taking action that is before 2023, but June 2023, at least still now, we will still have language for proposals, what reparations looks like, what it take, how much it's going to cost, et cetera.
And just to give a time, it just takes you to take your question and the question that's online. Bring them before we go to the next paragraph program.
Okay, so this is the last question.
Sure.
So the task force cannot come to a consensus at the last meeting as far as the eligibility. What new information are they gathering or considering that will clarify the eligibility requirements? Because economists don't really have anything to work off of because they were hoping to get work for the proposals that they were going to do from the last meeting.
And after hearing comments from the task force members, pretty clear they wanted more time to discuss it. So, for example, when Assemblyman Joan Sawyer gave a very personal presentation, he explained think it's worth repeating. Policy issue. It has to do with an open heart, and they're taking this very seriously. And he said he needed more time to possible. He needs more time. Got my attention. The person who seconded the motion people that are steeped in this whole struggle for reparations, newbies. And like Chris was saying, they fully behind Shirley Weber in this 2-year battle, along with community groups like CJEC that passed. Assembly he's an expert in the criminal. Then there are others who joined. Of the eligible class, and different. Second, the afternoon session will be the more detailed discussions about some of the issues that probably you're wrestling with. Then relocated to another state. I'm not focusing that as being the only question. And so at the end of that, I expect a vote. We're going to do, and we can't slow that process down. But I think there was a good reason.
So I think from all of
I want to this discussion here, and then we'll go back to Robert. We got one more question from the chat. The question of community of eligible. Five. Multiple. In January, talk about the legislative intent was around community of eligibility. Specifically for U.S. slavery in this country. After that meeting, Dr. Weber was so clear in her statement supportive of why the eligible class must start with those of conversation and right. So you share this lineage, but what a question that our team. What about, are my reparations portable? Can I and then take them with me and still get them wherever I go? If I want to go to another, who is the eligible class? Pretty clear. We get to the last question. Thank you.
And at that time, because I want to really focus on Richmond, I want to open it up. Once we finish this last question, I want to be able to, so we can address some of the people that are here.
We are here in the city.
Response to Dr. Lockie, I think that this whole issue is personal for the people. So everyone who has attachment, like I believe that he had an uncle that goes back to the Little Rock Knob. I think something similar, maybe not as but the issue came up where you to open the conversation to eligibility. Don't have that in their history, in their lineage. And so they were saying, but Black people who don't have Freedmen in their lineage, but they still face discrimination. That's where, like, to me, this almost seems like a stalling tactic. People can, you have a lot more voices coming in who believe Pan-African structure that all Black is black, and so reparations should be given, Black by census. And I don't think that an issue.
Well, your point is well. Your point is well taken. I don't think, Robert, you're stalling. You just need to discuss it. And, in the first meeting, an effort task force members to discuss this. But each and every public hearing after is chock. Beyond the public comment, which is the first hour, most of the time is set up for expert testimony. It's been very the task force members on an issue in a time. I will say Shirley Weber's testimony was powerful. Got every attention, as did Dean and Chemerinsky on the legal end of it. Time in the task force members need some time to discuss in the public and a trend how each person feels. And again, if the legislature, I think we ought to honor that.
So, well, first I want to thank you for answering those. for the questions from the audience, also for the questions in the chat, everybody's question, but we will make sure that we get your questions answered. So feel free to send us an email at gmail.com. I want to turn to the next part of the program here, and we actually want to hear from y'all. We want to hear from the people. Want to hear. Okay, are there other, want to go back to the questions online? Okay.
We have a question from someone called Anonymous here, and they want to know how does he personally feel should qualify for recreational belief? And that's a question for you.
Can't legally say how I will vote because all my vote and the discussion about the vote has to be in public hearing. But I don't think the community is monolithic. Just as the American community is not monolithic. I think the Black community is not monolithic either. Data shows evidence that there are descendants of freedmen, Americans who arrived here, particularly those who arrived after post-1965. I think that's also clear. So I think the nuances and the distinctions and the differences is something that has to be in full discussion. Session.
Thank you for that. I'm going to pass them to lead. Right on. And Don, thank you again, brother. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. The leadership of CJEC in knowing how to do this. Like they've mentioned, some of you have followed to do some of the other sessions. So what does Richmond have to do with this, right? For us groups, I wanted to give our eyes, and let me know if you can still hear me without the mic. Now to you all, this banner behind us. This is for young people. Action or an idea of what I'm going to say to have some. The younger people who are in our programs, Diversity Rise, the people. Young person made very clear the refinery, environmental justice, about personal. Really, political is the personal here. It's not just legislative. You know, and we're talking about people who are right now wanting their generations to have a part in this. So we made this right here. We just gave up our first shirt, and I want to give this second shirt, Got Reparations 21, because you were on the task list. I don't know if you can do that. Because Got Milk isn't popular, but to get the youth involved. We want to hear street by street, block by this, the Black Box Mobilization Campaign. It's one thing for having the hearings, but when we go into the encampments, which we and we spoke to those that wanted to come today, we spoke to the men that are on the bus stops, we speak to the people who are unhoused. I'm going to repeat that. They have a story, and their stories are. What we're doing is paying the youth to put their go-to soul barbershops. We have a barbershop we went to today. Beauty salons. Everyone puts into the slot a testimony. Pay to do that because we as adults, I'm an adult ally, I want to support the movement from Black Panthers, starting here, and just also here today, but to transition that all of us in the room, everybody Black. I'm for everybody Black. So if somebody wanted because of this, privilege boxes. What does that say? With these testimonials, we give this to actions. And we're trying to say with the funding we're trying to get, or we don't get the funding because we're door knockers. We're teaching these children. We've been to those of you from Richmond. Who's from Richmond, first of all? Let me find out. Who's in this room? We've been already to Harchester Village, which is the closest to the world. 4 generations of those who died. It's the first place police go to pick up people from. They're already ready to fill these boxes. The barbershops. This campaign, which is Black Box Mobilization Campaign, is we need more voices. Folks from different counties, 57, to we got boxes, put their stories in here. We will type them up. We'll be working with CJEC. On a lawsuit after segregation, 2 years ago, during COVID, they sued Sower City for segregation, meaning Black students could not go to that school. Recent history. Them children have stories. It won't be just me and Chris and those of you that. It's going to be those that have been affected. And what does that do when we say, as a not maybe those that have the Zoom get on this website. They have not been able to get into discussion. And so therefore they should not be discriminated at least to hear it. I wanted to show this because our young people, please look at it before you leave. It even says the Ohlone Lane, and just say for the this part of it because we just did it. That wants to talk about what's happened to you here. Your own stories, but also the stories of those that you think. So thank you. And I'll just so that everybody can have this. And this is called Got Reparations, and we will tonight as well.
Thank you, Alita. Thank you, Lid. Actually, so if you're from Richmond community, and maybe even if you're here from the Bay Area, actually, I know we have I don't want to put nobody in a spot. I know we have some folks here from Hayward and from Russell City. Invite you to come and talk about, come up, and you can come up to the mic here. If you're so moved, as they say, and talk about what's going on in Hayward, and why do you California reparations task force members, for those working on California, to know and to hear, and the message be to the California Reparations Task Force. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you.
What is actually I don't know if many of you know about Russell's Hayward. It started in Russell, just outside of Hayward, California, on the waterfront. And just November the 17th, last year, 2021, the city the apology was given because they forced families out by way of eminent domain. The problem was we were African American, we were indigenous, We were Hispanic. They called us a blight, and they wanted us out. They received documentation of meetings that were held and all the ordinances that were put in place in order to get. So we're going to review all of that to see what happened. I happened to be an infant. My address was, my father was serving the United States Navy, 3 children, and had to find a place to go. Put out in 1963, and my father returned at the end of 1963, and he had to get his, this is my older brother, my sister, and his wife, and we had to find a place, and they filtered us in our red line community in East Oakland, and we had to scramble. Imagine coming home from serving your United States to nothing. And that's what happened to 1,400 in the city of Russell City in Hayward, California. So I'll just sort of figure out how we get restored, how we get repaired. My mother is still that owned the land. We had 2 families, my mother and then my father's mother owned land, and they just basically took it. So now we're trying to figure out how to get our land back. That's why we're here to share our story and let you guys know how did this happen in many places, and a lot of people don't even know. And now it's coming to light. So I'm hoping that with figure out how to help people that are traumatized, because we weren't allowed to move in this community. So they filtered us into the ghettos over policing. So there's a lot that needs to be discussed and addressed in Reparations.
What year did this happen?
It's
It actually started in, the hearings were 1963. We actually got the documentation here before the Alameda County Redevelopment Agency. Literally had documentation that talked about the plan that they put in place. And decided to determine an area either by getting them to agree to sell at very arson and bulldozing their homes while they were away.
There was a specific, excuse me, Chairman. So there was a specific reason why they wanted this land. See, you what?
Yeah, if you actually look at, and then if you all are familiar with the Anthem Arena area, and you look at the way that that development was built, the city area was identical to the San Leandro area. They just made a decision that because Black folks and Indian folks, that they had forced them in Russell City, they weren't going to duplicate that for them. There was no water, there was no lights, there was no sewers, and despite being there, these people in that community built a very vibrant community to the point where they felt like they had to get rid of what it is they had forced to live. And the easiest way for them to do that was for the federal government, for the state of California, for Alameda County to establish a agency to essentially turn that whole area into an industrial area, rezoning it and forcing them out. As my sister said, we had grandparents who both lived there, who ultimately were forced out, given very little money to move out,
And the choice that they had to make was either accept the money or have the Alameda County determine that they thought they did not the true market value of the property.
I ask this way, and then we got some other. There was another. Oh,
I just wanted to, a couple things. Can I have your name? And then also, I would encourage you to test the task force listening sessions, because those will be recorded and made part of the record of the task force. And I would say that what you're describing is what happened to the Fillmore, the Harlem of the West in the 1950s, where 20,000 people were actually displaced, and almost 900 black businesses destroyed. And then in the 1960s, the Western Addition, along with Japan, actually, entire populations moved out because of eminent domain. But I just want to be able to get your name.
My name is Michael Johnson.
Michael Johnson.
And to your point, our grandmother was in San Francisco and was displaced from San Francisco to Russell City, and then displaced from Russell City.
So it's a double eviction.
Marion Johnson.
And your name is?
Marion Johnson.
You spell your first name?
Marian.
And can I ask? This was what I wanted to add to the question here, which was, so California is going to be creating legislation to do reparations. One of the forms of reparations, as we talked about, is compensation, but also restitution. So for your family, what would restitution look like specifically for your family? And what would compensation look like specifically for your family? And you have a sitting member of the California Reparations Task Force right here. So tell him what would restitution and compensation look like for your family, so maybe they can include it in what we see as the legislation.
So there's a number of things that can be done. Number one, we want our land back. All right. We have proof that we own the property. The second thing is we want all the leases that are on that land turned over to the rightful owners of that land, and all the taxes that were collected over the last 58 years returned to the people who own the land in the first place, and the cities and counties have gotten public benefit. One of the things we were reading tonight from the transcript was how they were going to force all those people in Russell City off the land, despite the fact that they were paying taxes to Alameda County. And for all those 58 years, they've been collecting those taxes off of those leases for all those properties that have been built, right? And then another form of reparation that we see fit is the dynamic of, well, there's been some questions for what would you all do with the money? Well, it's our money. Number one. The second thing is to be able to put ourselves in a position to suggest that, if we took our land and we haven't had access to it for the last 60 years, then perhaps reparation could look like not having to pay taxes on the land for the next 60 years, for the amount of time that you took the land and the wealth that we've been able to generate. A lot are not been able to generate. There are a number of families, my family in particular, and I was kind of listening to her a few minutes ago. When we talk about whether we're from Richmond or Oakland or Hayward or whatever the case may be, my parents were in Russell City. My grandparents were in Russell City. I had to grow up in East Oakland. I actually worked and still am an executive with Kaiser, who helped to build that hospital in Richmond back in 1994 and 1995, that were a member of an all-Black hospital administrative team. So we all work together to support our communities, because we all are being treated the same, not just because we're free slaves or unfree slaves. At the end of the day, when somebody sees us in our community, They see us as Black, and they treat us as Black. Whether you are Black as a part of someone who came from slaves or not, the discrimination is the same. I went to the University of Oklahoma for undergraduate, and what was clear to me in living in those 8 years was the type of discrimination that I prefer is actually in the South. I mean, in the South, because it's obvious. Here it's sophisticated. It's very well done. It's under wrap, right? They know what they're doing. They'll cut you if you won't even know it. So the dynamic for us as Blacks who are entitled to reparations is to see that we get what's ours, and that we have demonstrated over time that once we get what's ours, we actually know what we can do with it, right? And we need to have the opportunity just to repair and restore.
Awesome.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Appreciate for that testimony. If there are others too, by the way, who have testimony that they want to share, and I'm gonna give it to my co-host here.
I wanted to also say there's a group that called what you're saying because of the 40% now to 4%, especially Oakland, San Francisco. A lot of the papers are saying this. It's called Earth Rights. Earth Rights talks about the migration. For those of us that came from the South, right, to this area, Louisiana, other places, we came here to migrate for the shipyards. And now that we've migrated here for work, what has happened? We've having to migrate again. So the first migration was the Mayafa, right? We were brought here. Then it was the South. But to go to the East or the West, we had to go to good jobs. Now, we can't afford it here anymore. So those that aren't going to be on this docket have left. And within the last 2 years, just in COVID, I think I want to say 30 people that I know personally, African Americans, that have had to leave. And so what that's called is Earth Rights. And that's something that hasn't been a testimony yet, but it's what you're talking about, the migration of how I myself have left Oakland, Vallejo, and now I'm in Richmond. And I started in Richmond first. So the whole thing is trying to find that space, and those testimonies is another piece. But I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. Anyone else has a testimony that's here? Please feel free. We want to hear from you. Thank you.
Come on up, Shanna.
Okay, my name is Shanna. Hello. I'm actually born and raised in Berkeley, and my grandmother's family actually migrated here from Mobile, Alabama in the 50s. So there are many families that we all know migrated, whether you got people from Alabama, went to Detroit, someone who had so forth like that. Many of them did come here because of shipyards. And our family home is actually still here on Ohio Ave. This side of Ohio Ave, not that side. So one of the things that disappoint me, I think all of us have, is even with my father's side of the family, my father grew up in Sower. Okay, also grew up in HP, bakery as well. So I know a lot of that history too, and their parents actually came from Oklahoma. So it's a lot of that great migration generation that came here that thankfully I'm able to still communicate with them to get that history. Saturday I actually came to visit my great grandfather, my grandmother's sister, who was really the person of all the siblings and sisters. And this bothers me, particularly driving through Richmond, because the early part of my childhood was spent here. My mother would take me to my great aunt's house. I was in there, my mother was at work. So from being a toddler to probably the age of 5, I spent a portion of my life in Richmond as well as Berkeley. One of the things I noticed driving here is how changed the area is. I do not see a lot of the Black American families that I used to see growing up, particularly in Ohio. I see other groups of people who are here, I see it in Oakland, I see it in South Berkeley. If a lot of people are not familiar with Richmond, I'm talking about South Richmond. So if you know South Richmond, you know who was there. When I look at Ohio, it's very few families who are Black Americans who are freemen who are still there. I see everybody else there. I have no problem with anybody else here as long as you pay your dues of being here. You respect us when you see us. That's another thing that I run into. That people will look at us as though we don't belong here. And I remind them, if it was not for, you will not be able to be here. Oh, really? Yes. What else you want to know? So when I drive down the street, I'm looking at businesses that are here. I'm looking at homes that are collapsing. This was a vibrant community of us. And then the only thing that people see when they come to Richmond, like they do in a lot of parts of Oakland, is nothing but crime. They want it, like you said. There's brothers and sisters on the corner right there. Richmond Kaiser, and I'm passing by. And this is not one man in that situation. And when you think of Richmond, Oakland, South Berkeley, this is, and even in San Francisco, we are sitting there having a fight for our survival. And a lot of people don't understand that. This is serious. We on life support right now, and it's not just here, it's across the country. You should not have to feel that your generation migrated here and about just to hopefully be with families still safe. So once my aunt, great aunt, passes away, she I have to go back to Mobile before I leave from here. And I'm like, okay. She said to me already 4 times. My mother relocated officially 2 years ago in Mobile. So now I'm saying to myself, older, she wants to go back and visit her home. Now, whether she's going to stay there, in terms of something tragic that happens in that way, that's not even my business. I'm like, let me see if we can get her down because her father's sister is actually, she's the only sibling that is still alive. So I gotta make sure, and this is in Mobile, Alabama. If anybody knows about anything about Mobile, this is an African town. That is the lineage. So for my aunt, I'm like, need to make sure you can still connect roots. But it's here. The family is here, and it's like, we can't get rid of that home. That's the family home. A lot of people don't got that. Families pass along or move away, and then you sell your property and somebody else come in. And then you got to tell them, I remember when we lived here, it was nothing but Black families. You had teachers, you had gardeners, you had this, really? We got to tell our story. Ain't nobody else can tell stories. So thank you for the event. Something about when I go to this area and I'm looking at it like, this is not what Richmond was. This don't even make no sense. I know why, but it don't make sense. It don't feel like home, if that makes sense.
For the record,
Yeah.
first last name, if you don't mind?
You want me to spell it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you don't want to say it on the phone, you can.
No, I'll write it down.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to hear the Richmond. Some of the testimonies we have, say for instance, for those of you that remember Haiti, and the men horses, the Mexican border, this is where it happened as well, after the 60s, 70s, meaning the railroad tracks near Rochester Village. If you know the area, there were white men in Richmond, this city, that made sure those children stayed in Rochester because the country club is there. And now when people saw the Haitians coming over the border from Mexico, and the white men on the horses, right? People say, oh, that's Richmond. They identify that as Richmond because those are the stories people still tell you in Rochester that to get that have told me. Another story that I feel is important is McDonald is where the Klan because Oakland and San Francisco said no. And so instead, Justice, you remember here, the youth here, they do this bike talk about how this street was where the Ku Klux Klan could come because Oakland said no and San Francisco said no. The reason why the refiner of Chevron, they were kicked out of Oakland and San Francisco. They had power. Silicon Valley, they had the power. But this city did not say no. Why? Because like you said, it was very much black. It was very much people at that time, they had their homes or what have you. Birth rights have changed where people had to migrate, but there are scared testimonies to tell these stories of how Ku Klux Klan that came here right on McDonald. I think it was 1920s. I'm going to get the date right, but it was a parade because they weren't allowed in Oakland and San Francisco. Chevron wasn't allowed. And so when we talk about who are the people that have passed from the Chevron refinery, it's the black communities that are closest. Atkinson Village, right down the street, Harchester Village. And so the reason why we say we're happy y'all are here today, because we say a word called anti-blackness. And we want to regurgitate that word over and over because it does not give us any, when in fact folks are gone, we cannot tell their stories. So we're hoping that if you are interested, even if you don't live in Richmond, can someone from Marin Cities raise your hand? I think there's a couple. Marin City has their parade, their reparations coming up April 9th. They're also going to get involved with the Black Box. Who's from Vallejo? Vallejo is also going to be a part of the Black Box, getting young people to get these testimonies. So interested. For those of you in your town, and the purpose is because it's not for one city, it's so that we can have all these cities that have not been able to be heard. So we thank you all for coming today. I think.
So I got a couple of things. One, I want to, so as you're saying, we want to, obviously, part of what we're going to do is make sure that, and part of our job is to make sure that California's Reparations Task Force is transparent and gets engagement from the community, just like this all across the state. So I want to thank everybody for coming. I just want to respond to a couple of things that Shanna said here, and then to what the brother said from Russell City and the family from Russell City. First of all, thank y'all. Appreciate you. Shanna, something you said that I want to just add a little bit of, sprinkle on is we've been moving and being moved since we got to this country. And you said something that really resonated with me, which was that it doesn't feel like home, right? And that's something that's very, I think, unique to us as a people. And I want to tie that to what the brother was saying from the Johnson family. And again, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you much for coming down here too. And I think what you're saying about what reparations looks like for your family, specifically what you said about the types and forms of reparations, I think that's going to be powerful and help us actually define and decide what the legislation could ultimately look like. One last thing, and I want to do some education here because you made a point that I think we all kind of inside feel that feels right, but I want to clarify the point. When people see us as Black, they don't have to ask if we are descendants. That's what being Black usually means. So they don't have to ask you. They say this also when the police stop us, they don't ask us if they're Black. They don't have to. That's what being Black means. It means you were a descendant of U.S. slavery. So that's what it's meant. That's what it's meant in this country. So I wanted to extend our conversation because that's something that we hear a lot. And again, it inside it feels like it's right? You know, because I've been stopped by the police. I've been, but I know when they stop me because I was black, they knew that I didn't have no power, and that's because I'm a descendant of U.S. slavery, as Shannon said, of freedmen, right? And your story is a story that almost everybody in here whose lineage is in this country, who is a descendant of those freedmen and a descendant of U.S. slavery, has in their family at some point. Every single one of us who has this shared history has that story. And thank you again to the brother from Marin City, right? Come on up, talk on the mic, and then we are coming up on time.
Okay, I'll try to make this as quick as I can. These stories are going to be very interesting because we're going to hear the same stories over and over and over and over. I did it happen in Haiti, or I didn't know that it had happened over here. And the Klan was also in Oakland. They had big parades, big gathering in the hills of Oakland as well. And I came up in Richmond in the 60s. Now used to be Grand Autos, clothing store, Tom McCann's clothing store, all the way down to 10th Street, S.H. Cresses and Milan's Jeweler and the Fox Theater, Rogers Men's Store and Fells and all of that stuff, right? So what I wanted to say was, you know, a few years back, they were having a lot of chemical spills here in Richmond, right? And I worked with a lot of attorneys in terms of class action lawsuits. And Unical and a lot of the others that knew they were going to get sued, they set aside
Bluetooth
money. They were fighting, trying to win, but in case they lost, they already had pots of money set aside to deal with that. So as we're here in 21, we got into 23, maybe 24, maybe part of what we should ask for from the state, because we don't know who's going to be in office by the time we finish this, right? Or if the same, you know, whether they're going to pass this or not, we could have all the evidence in the world. So I think we should ask for monies to be set aside as we're going in anticipation. It may not, it ain't going to be all that we going to ask for, but it's going to be some set aside to let it know that we are serious about where we're going. And I think the education you guys are doing here now is really good. And sometimes when you're dealing with, you know, lawyers and professors and, you know, college people, conversations on level, right? And when you're dealing with everyday people, it's kind of on the level. So I think you may already have it. There needs to be some type of clear, simple curriculum to help people understand this, because I think we've been here so long that we've been desensitized and devalued to the point to where we don't even understand that we have real value anymore. And that's why nobody respects each other. I don't even know if when I hear, sometimes I ask, you know, am I feeling what I'm supposed to feel when this happens, right? Because part of slavery was, in order to remain even that much sane, you had to get rid of your feelings, even though grandmama and everybody loved their babies to death, right? The pain from losing people and seeing to be, it's like in prison. You have to where you lose your best buddy today, another best buddy tomorrow. Guys in Vietnam told me that they stopped having friends, right? And when my best friend was murdered in front of me, I didn't want any more friends, right? I didn't want any more friends. And the guy that turned out to be my best friend had lost his brother. And so I guess he needed another big one, right? But I was, you know, I kept him back, but he was so persistent over a couple of 2 or 3 years that we became best of friends. But if this thing makes you not want to be too close to anybody, right? And so even maybe we ain't as close to women as we should be, and they're not as close to us, so we fuss and fight. All of this is, I'm just saying, we don't desensitize and devalue to the point looking at what's happening in the Ukraine, and they're talking about, the children and the da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And it's news, right? But I mean, they've been bombing and killing in the Congo and Yemen and other places, but we, the little black kids, and the black mamas and the black refugees, right? Why? Because y'all not that important. And it's one thing not to be important to somebody else. It's another when it's happened so much and for so long that you're not even that important to yourself anymore, which is maybe why the killing goes down so easily. So what I want to say was ask these people they may do it, they may not. Tell them we want some money set aside each year while we're working on this thing. So no matter when we get finished, if we don't get all that we asked for, we will ask for all that we're supposed to get. So we might not get that, but there's something set aside. Arnold Schwarzenegger said something, he was in office that pissed the Jewish people off, right? And he had to quietly make a deal where there was like about $50 million, I think, put into an account for some type of Jewish center there in Los Angeles. We could research it, right? Just to kind of quiet that down, because Arnold daddy was a Nazi, right? So for us, the task force and the assembly people have something set aside in the budget each year while we're working on this. You can leave it there, but have it set aside. We come out $150. Stop, okay?
We're looking forward to, for those people that can't come to Marin City, that's April 9th. We have flyers on the table. Please feel free to connect and come back as well. You come to the mic, please.
Come on, bro.
We don't have that much time. If people can, please ask to grab some food. We did have a caterer just for you all, and we have some gifts we want to get out after you finish.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Not a question, more of a comment. The elderly dropped the mic, so I hate to come up out here. But I just want to express gratitude for being in this space. I'm a transplant to the Bay Area, Southern California, very similar things have happened. But just to see this in the Bay, this is part of our movement here. All right, so I'm very grateful for y'all doing this work.
Thank you, brother.
Come check out the City Ride and
Thank you, brother.
as well. We got a lot going on there.
And last thing to say too is, I don't know, but thank you very much for that. I appreciate you. I don't know if the mic is oh, yeah, one more. Come on up. Jeanette.
Mr.
Tamaki. Mr. Tamaki.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bell. One of the things, this is reparations. One of the things that I think we need in addition, in our reparations, in addition to money, that's important. I think what's really important also are mental health services for our people. Therapy, and that sister grew when she wrote that book, post-traumatic, we are still, our families have been having issues ever since, and it's passed through the families. And through our culture. So we definitely need to have therapy paid because it was created. Issues here. So we definitely need therapy, mental health, support.
In other words, the problem we need is spirit.
Thank you. That's so there was a few amazing points made, and we want to get to the giveaway. We got some stuff to give away here. Don, I hope you heard those last 2 points there, or last 3 points, right? I think that was a brilliant suggestions, right? One about the report itself. One I think is related to the report itself, but how we communicate in the report. Excuse me, y'all. Hold on, y'all. Hold on.
I'm sorry. Excuse me, we can hear you.
Hold on. One second.
Go outside to the area.
Thank you. So one about how we are communicating. So a 600-page plus maybe more report is going to come out in the next few months. It's going to be the first of 2 reports. I've never read anything that's 600 pages. I've never read anything that's 1,000 pages. Right now, I don't even read like this. I read through Audible now. I get read to me, which I still count as reading. So, so my point is, part about what I think the brother was making a similar related point, that we create what we're doing now, what we've already done, but also what comes out and what comes next is going to be very, very this effort. So I want to underscore that too. A brother made another brilliant point. Let's start putting money aside now and show that we're serious. Let's start putting some money aside now. California has a rainy day fund, quote unquote, a rainy day fund. It's raining like hell right now, right? It's been raining on us. We also have pretty much every year a budget surplus. We got a 30 plus, 50 plus, $60 plus $1 billion surplus right now. Maybe we can write into law that every year, if there's a surplus, when there's a surplus, part of that surplus gotta be put to a reparations fund. Maybe the rainy day fund must be called now the reparations day fund, right? So I want to underscore those 2 points. The brother made a couple of brilliant points. Thank you, John, for the amazing points too about the fact that we're going to need rehabilitation psychologically and those kinds of supports and those kinds of services and systems as a part of what we see as a part of our reparations, right? And that's again, conversation is must be there, and the rehabilitation. And I think John had made a good point about having a particular focus on our mental health and making that a big part of what we do. So yeah, so much.
I want to get out of drive real quick. So I wanted to
Finish this stuff, I'm gonna leave.
Can I? Okay, you can get. Well, I wanted to see if you came from Marin City, so we want to give you a gift, and the first I got a question. So I give you this. First of all, we can testimony.
Is it money? Other than reparations?
It's a gift. So we don't get 80, 31, 21. All of us together. What's your name, sir? Well, can I give you this gift here? Yes, here we go. This is just for coming through. You have a couple of you. Anyone have a child that came through today? Okay, can I give this gift? This is for a child. This is just for us. We do have everything we need, right? We do want this reparation. And before I pass it to you, go ahead and ask, and then I'll do the rest of the gifts on that.
The last comment was on the lines of what aspects of it. In that, make sure that money's from victims and survivors of sexual abuse. Because as I look around the room, like we all shades in here, right? From the dark, I can guarantee, like I'm 72 years old, right? If anybody that's in my category, if you go back to your mother or your grandmother or grandfather, you're gonna find a grandmother or easily passed white. Got the pictures, if you can dig it, I don't care. My brother was the color of this sticker, right? Our great grandmother on my daddy's side,
grandfather on my mother's side were both slave babies, right? Who the man was born in the Civil War, and he died in the early 50s. The grandmother was born in the 1870s, and then died till the mid 1960s. So it ain't been that long ago. To 1900 is 30 years, right? And from 1900 to 1960 is 60. So coming out back to Louisiana, we saw black people, look, if you made it to the 90 and 100, we wasn't doing nothing, right? So that was a common sight when I was, so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, then was 90 years old, 105, right? 105, that's 103, you had to call me Mr. because I'm old. Right? Each one of these grandparents, you should brag about that, right? Now understand. We love them white looking grandma and dad. Like my man, the white people would say,
Disclaimer, and then I have a question. So,
Hold on, y'all.
We can keep our voices down a little bit more. That's what people think.
Before you so I actually carried my maternal grandfather's name, which his grandfather and KIM. So this is everybody know. Okay. The other thing is something I thought about.
Malik.
The government. Now, we know that AB 3121 was signed in 2020, but I'm wondering, should there be a new government? Is there any adverse effects on? My thing is, let's not just look at present, let's look at future, and how we approach it, not just the task force itself, but because it is financial law, could there be a possibility of delay or any kind of adverse effect if there is a new government?
I'm going to attempt to answer that question. The short answer is yes, to be honest with you. Because any reparations legislation that we create, when we create reparations legislation, when we do create it, that's when it's into law. So who the government is going to matter. Who the government is going to matter. There are probably no effects on the existing task force itself because the was created by law, so the law. But yeah, there is a risk that if there's a new or the type of that becomes legislation that gets to his desk. So there is a and so it's a brilliant, and we must short answer is yes.
Only that's what I have to answer. That is why we need something called mobilization campaigns. So when we're saying we need to have an answer, only a few of us in this room, when there's what, how many counties? We have is that we know which counties we haven't gone to. The privilege is we still can be mobilizing, and yes, it's a lot. When you said how many pages it is, but there's law students and cases that I've worked with where because of the injustices of the 60s, we don't do that now. They would be willing. There are Black Lives Matter groups started by law students who are ready to support and things like this. And we got to see that we're a part of that. And the more information we have, again, is why mobilization campaigns will bring more of us. Can you imagine 10 more groups like this here today? You all have already done, you know, Oakland, LA, Sacramento. But I'm thinking about those places in 57 counties that may not have heard or have the opportunity. And what that means is that there will be created a tribe of us, like there were when Martin Luther King, right? I was in Alabama, Birmingham, where I used to work for the Civil Rights Institute there. The reason why the children were involved in the 6th Street Baptist Church, where I worked, across the street for the civil rights, is that it was not just one church, it wasn't just one mosque. They didn't agree on certain things. They had a vision, though, to come together. And then they said, let's bring the children in, let's politically educate them, and then the children have their movement. And so these children now, if you go to the Civil Rights Institute, are recorded. They're grown people now running things in legislation. But we have to see that we can build that. We have 57 counties. We can build this, I don't want to say army because I don't want to scare anyone, but building this place where we're getting savvy. All those youth, all those people, all our communities. And it has to be that we start not just thinking, this is going to be it. We need to find those young people. We need to find those pastors like Martin Luther King did. We need to find those lawyers. We need to find, if you remember, they had one in seamstress that came to the church. And they, you know, during the Rosa Parks, there's something called the Highland Institute, where we are, where we would sit, myself included, my children included. We sit still at the same chairs Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King went to. And what did we do? We're planning and teaching the children for the next generation to be about what we're doing. So there's a part where we can bring in a next force, if it's the lawyers and the children, but that's the part of the mobilization camp. How many more campaigns can we have and be creative and go into the schools? I have 2 students that work with us. I was hoping they were gonna come tonight. In our high schools, they have a Black student center, and she runs it in the high school here in Richmond. They want us to come. Let's not leave out any options to have a mobilization campaign, not just in community rooms, not just in churches, but maybe in schools as well, and also in, for me, in encampments and prisons is where I would like to also see. So I hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I'll say, and I know we want to respect y'all time. The only last point I'll make here is that what Alita's saying here is actually is true. Part of how we're going to win ultimately our reparations and then keep what we get is, and part of what I think this community engagement process is going to have to do and expand out into is not just, and we know this as organizers, right? We got to go to where the people are. We got to go to where you are. We should not expect that you're always going to come to where we are, even if we come too close to where you are, right? So we are here in Richmond now, been in LA, Sacramento, et cetera, Oakland, but we got to go to where our people are, and we got to be where our people are and talk how our people talk too. And so I think something that I think we want to add, and there's been conversation around this among the folks who are doing the planning around the listening sessions, but doing community listening sessions where we invite people to come into where we are is probably not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough for us. we actually have to, and maybe this is for the task force to figure out, is in addition to the 12 listening sessions, what else do we need to do to go to where our people are? And what does that look like supported by the task force? Because again, as organizers, we know this. You can set a day and a time for a meeting, but you're gonna get more people and connect with more people if you go to where the people are. So just something to put out there, and again, that is a great point that you made, Alita, too. So we want to wrap up. I don't know if you have any more gifts to give out.
I do. The group that came in from Hayward, is it Hayward? I wanted to give you all a gift. I think it's amazing. And I'm gonna let from now on, can someone pass? You all pick this next one, because you all just do it the way I think. And I, anyone else did? I don't know if you listen to mine, but we've got, what's the name of, what's going on?
What's up, bro?
Okay. And I think there was a couple other people who, yes, you also testified today.
Alita, we got one more question too, guys, if we can take it.
I was just saying, so as we're coming together, networking, communicating with each other, and bridging organizations together, sometimes we have organizations have a firm mission statement.
Yep.
So as we just go forward, making these unifications, will everybody be okay with the lineage based scale, or are we leaving that up to the task force to decide, and then we move on from there? Because from CJEC, we've been firmly rooted in lineage data, and so I don't have a problem with of course, we want to extend hands and unify as many people as we can, because that's how we get the work done. But are those other groups firm in the understanding that this will be linear, racial fair, or do they have their own ideas of how they would like to see reparations, and how do you see it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'll try to answer quickly. So, and the question is about, and this relates to a similar question that I actually had, which is, who's going to do these community listening sessions, right? Who's responsible for the community listening sessions? The ones that are officially anchored and sponsored by the task force. So there are 6 community groups that have been chosen to lead the community listening sessions, each one to do 2. Our organization, thankfully, has been chosen as one of those 6. Each one of those groups, though, and there's no other group in there that is born for reparations, except us. We were born for reparations as an organization. That's why we were born. So, and to your question, each of the other groups has a different kind of focus. Some of them may be focused on working with our faith organizations. Some of them may be focused on working with our folks who are incarcerated. Some work with our folks who are working with youth. There are different focuses. To be honest with you, part of what you see here, part of what you see us doing is working with groups that may have different focuses, right? We want to be able to show that, one, there may be groups with different focuses and even disagreements about parts of what reparations should look like and other issues related to reparations, but that we can work together and that we can actually bring folks together. Now, specifically to your question though, I would not have a problem at all with working to try to get a shared vision and a shared mission statement among the 6 anchor orgs. I wouldn't have a problem working towards that. Obviously, I'm one of many people who's involved in that process. But I think it's going to be important. It's just as important as something like that would be. It's going to be just as important that we work together to get the word out about reparations. Now, the task force is going to decide, as you heard Don say, in March, who the eligible party is. So particularly on the eligible party question, I am confident that the task force is going to decide to stay within the legislative intent of the author of the bill, to stay with what the bill actually says about who is the eligible party, and to stay with what the people have been saying since day one, and to stay with what our best legal and constitutional advice is on that question, that we must start with those of us and with those of us who are descendants of U.S. slavery in this particular country. Once that decision is made, doesn't really matter what the other groups think about that particular question. That decision will have been decided. That's why we have a task force. So a shared mission statement might also go a long way and help, but the task force is going to set the question of who's eligible. I'm speaking specifically about that because that's coming up at the next meeting. A shared vision might help, but the task force is going to make that decision in March. And again, I'm very, very confident that they're going to make what I believe is the right decision.
Is it a short? Just very short.
Yeah.
Okay. One more thing. You know, guys, we have been overlooked in reparations for all of our lives. The Jewish people got reparations. Okay. The Native Americans got reparations. Still do. All the casinos, they got that. We have been overlooked, and we're the first people in this country. Okay, but they got reparations, and we never did. And the other thing, I don't know what organizations you all are connected with or people you're connected, but we've got to open our mouths and talk to people. Because if we don't share information, people don't think about this stuff. They're not thinking, because they haven't, okay, I'll get out, they haven't had an opportunity. So we've got to open our mouths and get our masses of Black folk and make them aware and start thinking about this, okay? So that they can start becoming a part of these meetings and stuff like that to share stuff.
So bring that right full circle. Can everyone stand up? We're going to do something together. And I wish, John, let's see if those that two are still outside. I would love for them to come through with us. This is something that may not happen in the legislation, and hopefully it will. It's just an exercise that we want to steer because our young people are doing this and they're having discussions, and we need to unite. So what I'm going to ask is everyone to do this. If you're standing, it's an exercise of bringing us together in the spirit of African Americans and the descendants, a spirit of something called the Spirit of Mandela, which was an international tribunal. This is a fist of solidarity started by a man named H. Rap Brown. His name is Imam Jamel, the political prisoner. We ask if you can put your fist up. This is unusual, right? You're not demonstrating, but we are demonstrating. When we change this legislation, what AB 3121 is doing is demonstration. Okay, and there is a quote by a woman. Her name is Asada Shakur. And she says this, and I wish that everyone can say it with us. It gives spirit back to what we're doing, to the foundation that we are unified, no matter if we have differences of whether it's money or land or anything else comes about, that we can do it together. And it goes like this, so please repeat after me. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect each other. We must love and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Now, if they said and understood our language, no disrespect to the state capitol, they would understand when we say it in this way. I want you to bring it a level up for those of you that make testimonies and for those of you who didn't. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love, look at each other, and protect each other. We must love and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We thank you, AB 3121. We thank you, everyone that's coming tonight. Please stay a part of this movement. They need us and we need you. Thank you. And say it again. Thank you, Mr.
We went way over. That's great. No, that's fine. Break down.
He said I can come back tomorrow, but the basis is food taking. Anyone that can please take some food off my hands? I gave 50 pounds for COVID. Please don't let them take any food off.
I can't do it right now, but put it up your brother, man.
And she did a lovely training.
Thank you, appreciate you. This is a real process.